Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the Chevy Silverado ZR2 after reviewing a few of them, and then obviously doing a huge off-road comparison with the ZR2 versus the Raptor and the TRX. And the main goal of this video is to hopefully help you guys decide whether or not you should look into purchasing a ZR2. With that being said though, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get right into the video. So we first have to talk about where the Chevy Silverado ZR2 lives as an off-road truck. There's a bunch of different off-road truck categories now, and these are Ben Hardy created, just so you guys know, but I feel like this is a pretty good system. Now the first category is the sub-entry-level off-road truck. So trucks in this particular segment is like the Ford F-150 FX4 or the Ram 1500 backcountry. These are trucks that are pretty much street trucks that have a couple off-road goodies on them. Maybe they have slightly more aggressive tires. Maybe they have a locking rear differential, but their main intended purpose is to be driven on-road, and they just have a little bit of off-road capability, but they probably don't have more ground clearance than a truck made by that manufacturer that doesn't have that off-road package on it, for example. And so it's not really a huge step above a regular truck. Now the next segment is the entry-level off-road truck segment. And this is stuff like your Ram Rebel and your Chevy Trail Boss and your Ford F-150 Tremor. Now this particular segment is going to have trucks that have smaller diameter wheels, aggressive off-road tires, dedicated off-road shocks, locking rear differentials at least, and then stuff like trail control maybe. And then they're going to be slightly lifted over a stock truck from that particular manufacturer. So they're going to have more ground clearance than a regular truck from that manufacturer. And so these trucks are more dedicated to off-roading. And then you have the higher end off-road trucks. And this is where I might be a little bit controversial, but this is where trucks are going to typically have more dedication towards off-roading within different segments. So a really good example, for example, is the Chevy Silverado ZR2. And I said for example twice. Man, I can't talk some days. But anyways, the Silverado ZR2 has front and rear lockers. It has a decent amount of ground clearance, significantly more than most entry-level off-road trucks. And again, it's got aggressive off-road tires. And so you guys can see this truck is, more dedicated towards off-road use than it is towards on-road use. Another truck that I typically put in this category is the Tundra TRD Pro. Even though that truck doesn't have the most aggressive tires, it has really advanced shocks and suspension. And that truck, if it was just given more aggressive tires, would be as dedicated to off-roading as the Silverado ZR2. But this is the first segment of categories. And then you have the super high-end / Baja / crazy rock crawl off-road trucks. And this is where stuff like the Ram TRX and the Ford Raptor lives. And so they have crazy amounts of ground clearance, massive oversized tires, crazy shocks that can handle pretty much any sort of situation. And the main thing about this segment is these trucks are just dedicated to off-road use. And the manufacturers, they do make these trucks so that they can drive comfortably on-road, but they worry more about the off-road performance than they worry about on-road performance. And so that's the first thing that we need to talk about, is where the Silverado ZR2 actually lives. And again, this obviously will probably be argued a little bit, but I believe that this lives between entry-level off-road trucks and crazy high-end stuff like the Raptor and the TRX. I think that it's just a little bit more truck than something like a Trail Boss or like a Rebel or like a Ford Tremor, but it's not quite on the same level as Raptor or TRX. Now at this point you guys might be wondering, why the heck did you compare the ZR2 to the Raptor and to the TRX if they aren't even in the same segment? And here's the deal. First off, it just has to deal with availability. I own a TRX and a Raptor, and so putting together a three-way off-road comparison where I own more than half the vehicles being filmed in the video is a lot easier than trying to put together an off-road comparison where I don't own any of the vehicles. I don't own a Tremor, I don't own a Toyota Tundra TRD Pro, etc., right? So that's the first thing, is just availability. The second thing, and the point that I was trying to make with that off-road review and the point that I want to make with this video, is that the Silverado ZR2 is Chevy's halo truck for off-roading. And so even though it is not necessarily in the same segment as the Raptor and the TRX from a price point perspective, and then also from, just a spec perspective, people are looking at the ZR2 as if it's the same as the Raptor and the TRX, because you can't get a more capable Silverado past the ZR2. It's the same thing with the Toyota Tundra TRD Pro. A lot of people will compare the TRD Pro to the Raptor and to the TRX, not because it is as good as those trucks off-road from a spec perspective, but because there's nothing beyond the Toyota Tundra TRD Pro. So hopefully you guys kind of get the point that I'm trying to make here. And that's where I think that Chevy made a slight mistake with the ZR2. Now, before I kind of like dive a little bit more into that, I want to say, I think the ZR2 is an amazing truck, especially after taking it off-road. It has front and rear lockers, and despite the fact that it has pretty small tires, only 33s and not 35s or 37s like you see with the TRX and with the Raptor, it still kept up with those trucks on the high-speed driving and then also with the crawling, right? It was a little bit more difficult with the ZR2 than with those two trucks, but it still kept up and it still managed to get through all of the obstacles that those trucks went through. And so my impressions on the ZR2 is it's an extremely capable truck that is going to basically exceed most people's needs from an off-road perspective with where their skill set actually lies. And I also think the truck looks amazing from an exterior perspective and from an interior perspective as well. Chevy just nailed the design with this truck. It looks really aggressive and cool, and they just did a lot of stuff right with this truck. But I don't think that they did the ZR2 name justice, and I don't think that they did the Halo truck in their lineup justice as well. So again, you look at Chevy's lineup with the Silverados. On the base side of things, you have a Z71 package, which is like sub-entry level. And then you have the custom Trail Boss and then the Trail Boss LT that are kind of like in that entry-level off-road truck segment, depending if you put 18-inch wheels or 20-inch wheels on those trucks. If you put 20-inch wheels on your Trail Boss LT, you're getting demoted to sub entry-level off-road truck segment because your wheels are too big for off-roading. But right, you have that. And then you have the ZR2 now that's, slightly above a Trail Boss, but it's not as differentiated as a Raptor is from an F-150 Tremor and as the TRX is from the Ram 1500 Rebel. If you look at a Tremor versus a Raptor, the Raptor has completely custom suspension. It has coil suspension, whereas the Tremor has leaf springs. The Raptor has live valve shocks from Fox, whereas the Tremor has monotube shocks in the front and then twin tube shocks in the rear. The Raptor has way more travel, and it has tires that are significantly bigger than the Tremor. The Tremor has 33s, the Raptor has 35s or 37s. Right? And I could go on and on about how the Raptor has a wide body and how the Raptor has more power than the Tremor because its engine has been tuned to have more power as well. And the Raptor sounds crazy with its trombone exhaust. And so the Raptor just gives you a driving experience that is so different from the F-150 Tremor that even though they're both F-150s technically, they don't feel like the same, like remotely. Like if you've driven a Tremor and you've driven a Raptor, you know what I'm talking about. And then same thing with the TRX. And the TRX even takes it to a farther extreme because the TRX has a completely different engine than the Ram Rebel. The Ram Rebel has a naturally aspirated 5.7 Hemi, whereas the TRX has a supercharged 6.2 liter V8. And so just from an acceleration perspective, it's just such a huge difference. So the TRX already feels different from that perspective. And then again, it has custom suspension, custom shocks from Bill Stein, and so it drives so much different. And then again, wide body package. It has 35s, the Rebel has 33s. And so again, you guys can kind of see my point. The TRX is so much different from the Rebel, and it just gives you a driving experience that is unlike any other driving experience you'll experience within Ram's lineup. Now you go to the ZR2. It has the 6.2 liter V8, which you can get in almost every single Silverado package, and they didn't tune the 6.2 in the ZR2 to be more powerful than any of the other 6.2s. It has the same amount of horsepower, and the ZR2 has the same axle ratio as other Silverados. It has a 3.23 axle ratio, so it doesn't feel any punchier off the line compared to any other Silverado with the 6.2. Transmission's tuned the same as well. That's another big difference with the TRX and the Raptor. Their transmissions are so much more responsive than their regular counterparts, whereas the ZR2, its transmission's the same as a regular Silverado. And then you look at the suspension and shock perspective. Chevy did an amazing job by adding the Multimatic shocks. The dampening on the new ZR2 is amazing, so I will give them credit for that. I feel like those shocks are as good as what you have with the Raptor and with the TRX, but the ZR2 doesn't have crazy travel numbers like the Raptor and the TRX. It's just slightly more than a Trail Boss, and it has a front locker, whereas the Trail Boss only has a rear, well, it doesn't have a rear locker, it has the G80 system, which is automated, and yeah, I don't really want to get into that. But, the ZR2 does have quite a bit over the Trail Boss, but then it also doesn't have tires that are really that much bigger. They are bigger than the Trail Boss's tires, but by a very marginal amount. And so the point that I'm gonna make at the end of this video is, first off, I'm not saying that the ZR2 is a bad truck. I still think the ZR2 is an amazing value. For about $70,000 and some change, you get an extremely capable off-road truck with a naturally aspirated V8, a big naturally aspirated V8 that is a ton of fun to drive. And like I said, you're probably not going to be able to get to the limits of that truck with most off-roading that you will do. And it looks amazing, and it truly is a halo truck for Chevy's brand. But that being said, it doesn't have the same special feel as the Raptor and the TRX. A Raptor drives like a Raptor, feels like a Raptor, looks like a Raptor. A TRX drives like a TRX, feels like a TRX, and looks like a TRX. A Silverado ZR2 drives like a Silverado, looks like a Silverado, and feels like a Silverado. I know that's kind of like a weird way to put it, but that is the best way that I can put it, is the ZR2 feels like the best Silverado ever made, whereas the Raptor and the TRX feel like their own thing, and they feel like the just craziest things ever. And so, yeah, there you go. The last thing I want to talk about is going to be pricing with all three of the trucks, because I think this will kind of hit home with the point that I'm trying to make, that, you know, even though the ZR2 isn't a Raptor or a TRX, I still think it's a great value. So the ZR2 now, after Chevy's price increase, you know, starts at like 70-something thousand, and then fully loaded, it's probably gonna be like mid-70s roughly for a loaded up ZR2. Raptor starts at around 70,000 now, and then loaded up, it's around 80. If you get a 37 package, you're gonna be like mid-80s. And this is before market adjustment. I will talk about that in a moment. And then TRX, it seems like starting's around 80 now, and then loaded up, you're close to $100,000. So if we just look at a sticker price perspective, the ZR2 undercuts both of those trucks fully loaded. Because again, a fully loaded ZR2, you're like mid-70s roughly. Fully loaded Raptor, you're mid-80s. And then fully loaded TRX, you're like $100,000. But then we have to talk about market adjustment. And this is where things get kind of interesting. So I've seen mixed market adjustment on the ZR2. I've seen some dealers that are just charging MSRP for the ZR2s, and I've seen some that are marking up the price, but not a massive amount compared to the Raptor and the TRX. So what I've been seeing is like $5,000, $10,000 over sticker. So with market adjustment, again, this is as of me filming this video, the ZR2 goes from being a mid $70,000 truck to being a low $80,000 to mid $80,000 truck. The Raptor has the craziest market adjustment. I regularly see $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 over sticker. So the Raptor goes from being an $80,000 to $85,000 truck loaded up to being a $100,000 truck. And then the TRX is kind of an interesting case. So I see some dealers still charging over MSRP, $10,000, $20,000. And then there's other dealers that are charging MSRP or under MSRP. It's literally all, like, the TRX is so confused. I don't understand, because like, there's used TRXs that are selling for more money than new TRXs. And like, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm gonna make a video on this. Like, I need to research more into it. I'm trying to figure out how this is happening, because it's such a weird situation. But I guess that because of the different like dealership things with the TRX, I think we can just say that MSRP with the TRX. So the Raptor and the TRX right now in today's market are selling for about the same amount of money, whereas the ZR2 in today's market is selling for like $15,000, $20,000 less than the Raptor and the TRX. So the question you have to ask yourself that I can't answer for you is the Raptor and TRX worth $15,000, $20,000 more than the ZR2, again, with today's current market conditions? And yeah, that's going to sum things up for today's video. Hopefully that was helpful. I feel like this is going to be one of my more controversial videos, but I feel like I did a pretty good job with just keeping things as factual as possible. And I mean, like I said several times in the video, I think they're all great trucks, and they all have buyers for them. There are people that the ZR2 is going to work for. There's people that the Raptor is going to work for, and there's people that the TRX is going to work for as well. And so yeah, with that being said, I'll see all of you in that next video.